And we are back with the next episode of The Horror Guys.
This one's going to be epic. Epic episode, I say.
They're all epic.
This one's going to have horror movies, though.
Okay. Trying something different, I guess.
Going out on a limb here this time.
I'm Brian.
And I'm Kevin.
And what do we have for people this week?
Well, we have... This week we'll be watching some classics. Classics?
Well, it's old.
Okay.
One of them's old.
Okay, at least a classic. HorrorTales.666, Part 2.
Okay, that one's not so much classic.
Not a classic yet. Someday it might be, yes. However, there is an anthology that's a classic, Black Sabbath from 1963.
There you go.
And The Strangers from 2008, and The Ritual from 2014.
All right.
And a short.
And a short, yes.
Animals.
Are these all fantastically wonderful, great movies like usual?
No,
Okay,
they are not.
They're not.
Some
All
are
right.
and some are not.
Might not be the way you think it's going to go. We got a Boris Karloff film from the 60s.
How great is that?
An ultra cheap indie film. And we got two big budget ones from the 2000s. And I'll bet there's a surprise here or two.
Maybe.
All right, so start up with the oldest one, Black Sabbath from 1963. Was it named after the famous music group?
No, the other way around.
Literally, they were named after this movie. They looked out the window and saw where the crowds were and said, they were going under some other name. I don't know what it was. They looked out and said, all the crowds are across the street at the theater. What are they watching?
Black Sabbath.
And they changed their name to copy it. Yeah, I had no idea they were that old. 1963?
I didn't know that.
How old are those guys now?
Well,
If
wait a minute.
they're
Wait a
even
minute.
alive.
It says it was formed in Birmingham in 1968. Could this story be fabricated?
Could be. Or maybe there was like a repeat. They brought it back a couple years later.
I don't know.
Well, that's the story.
I'm looking on their history here, and they're not that old. Years active, 1968 to 2006.
Well, back before everything got on TV all the time, they did bring movies back to the theater. Didn't mean it was first run. Well, anyway, directed by Mario Bava, written by Anton Chekhov, Alexei Tolstoy, and Guy de Maupassant, stars Boris Karloff, Michelle Mercier, Mark Damon, Jacqueline Pirot, 1 hour, 32 minutes. And this is an anthology. It's got 3 stories.
Oh, okay. Yes, they were playing shows in England in 1969. The band was called Earth. Earth? Just Earth? Yeah.
Crappy name, that's why they changed it. Yeah.
A cinema across the street from the band's rehearsal room was showing the 1963 horror film Black Sabbath, starring Boris Karloff. While watching, people lined up. They noted that it was strange that people paid that much money to see scary movies, and then they wrote the lyrics for a song called Black Sabbath, and then they said, hey, let's, one thing led to another.
Yeah,
so,
okay.
yes, the story is
true.
True, yes.
Just
the timing.
Yeah,
it was not a new movie then, yeah.
All right. Well, we watched the American International version of the film, which was in English, dubbed. And supposedly the Italian version is a bit longer, and it's more brightly lit and generally looks better. And actually, we started the Italian version and decided to go with the dubbed version later, and it definitely, the Italian did look much cleaner. Mm-hmm. I kind of wish we'd watched the subtitled version now. It had to be better.
I wonder. Yeah.
Well, Boris Karloff comes out and introduces himself and explains that this is an anthology of 3 tales. And they cut right to the first thing. And supposedly he had a lot more to do as the host of the 3 movies, or the 3 stories, but they cut all that out.
Huh.
At least not in the international version.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, the first one is La Goccia d'Acqua, which probably sounds a lot better if you speak Italian. A drop of water.
Something to do with water.
Yeah, a drop of water. Helen gets a phone call on a really old dial phone, which may not have been so old at the time. She's told to come right downstairs right now, but she doesn't really want to. Over at the big house, the maid answers the door and lets Helen in. The maid tried to manage her patient, but Helen is an expert. We figure out that basically the maid has called Helen, who's a sort of a nurse. The patient is a medium, and she's threatened to curse on those she doesn't like. You'd never want to get a medium with Alzheimer's. What are they going to do?
Well, yeah,
What are they going to do?
Who are they going to summon?
Helen pulls the curtain away, and the patient is already dead, and has been for a while from the looks of her. The maid complains that the spirits of the dead killed her. Even her relatives were afraid to come around. She talked to the dead every Friday evening, and she died during one of those sessions. Helen notices the big honkin' ring on the corpse's finger and steals it.
Bad move.
Never do that, yes. Especially not from somebody who's, talked to the dead. The body doesn't want to stay put, but Helen eventually forces her hands together. She knocks over a glass of water that drips on her. A drop of water.
Shocking.
Helen then goes home and puts the ring on. A great big housefly attacks her, and she waves it off, but then notices the ring is missing. She starts to hear water dripping somewhere, and she finds water dripping here and there around the house, but the doggone dripping won't go away.
Drip, drip, drip.
The fly, the dripping, and the blinking lights start to get to Helen, and she finally screams. Finally, she opens the bedroom door and sees the dead woman in there, who gets up and walks towards her. The dead woman, who looks suspiciously like a puppet, comes closer and closer to Helen. Helen then strangles herself in her madness with her hands. You know how hard that is to do?
That would be very hard to do. You'd have to be really mad.
Yeah. And then when you pass out, you'd stop strangling yourself. So, yeah, that's hard to do.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, the neighbor then calls the police and explains what happened. They find no one there but Helen, and the policeman said she had been frightened to death.
Yikes.
This sounds like one of those old radio stories or something that they just had a little bit more budget and decided to video. How basic of a story is that?
It was real basic.
The next story...
It was scary, though, wasn't it? Scary!
Oh, I'm terrified, yes.
Yeah. Ugh.
Well, Boris Karloff comes back, complaining about telephone calls at inopportune times, and leads us into the second installment called Il Telefono. The telephone.
The telephone.
Yeah, you figured that
See,
one out.
I'm practically fluent in Italian.
Rosie comes home late at night, just missing the phone ringing. It rings again, and this time she answers it. Unfortunately, there's no one on the other end of the line. This repeats several times with no one there. Finally, there's a man. Hello, Rosie. He describes what she's wearing as if he can see her right now. He calls again and tells her to take off all her clothes. She gets ready for bed and locks the door extra tightly. She looks all around and hides her money and jewelry under the couch. He calls back and explains that he saw her do it. He says they'll be together soon. She will die before dawn.
Uh-oh.
She finds a blank piece of paper slipped under her door, and ghostly words appear on it as she reads along. He calls back on the phone, and she says, Frank is dead. You can't be Frank. Could it be Frank's ghost? What do you think? Were you going to bet?
I don't think it was Frank's ghost.
Okay. You don't think it was Frank's ghost?
I think it was really Frank.
Okay. Rosie calls Mary and says what just happened. Mary believes Frank is dead. Rosie wants Mary to rush right over, but Frank calls back and explains that Rosie will soon be dead. Rosie was the one who turned Frank into the police years back, and he knows it. Later that night, someone comes in the front door and slowly walks around the house. He sneaks up behind Mary and strangles her. Rosie wakes up and sees Frank standing in her room. He climbs on top of her, and she stabs him with a butcher knife. But his voice still comes in on the telephone.
Okay, so there's a little bit of ghostliness there.
Karloff comes back to tell us a bit about vampires. The only thing all the various vampire stories agree upon is that vampires drink blood. The Wordalac lives on the blood of only the ones that they love. And the third story is called I, Wordalac.
Boris Karloff, his only portrayal of a vampire.
Yeah, he's not just the host, he actually acts in this one.
Yep.
Sort of. A young man named Vladimir, on a horse, finds the body of a man run through with a dagger. As the sun goes down, he passes the nearby castle and stops at a house for the night. A man named Ivan comes downstairs and says the dagger belongs to his father. The body belongs to Arabek, a Turkish bandit, sometimes called a wordalak, and the locals are really glad he's dead. The man at the house says that now that the wordalak is dead, they only have their father to fear. He says that if his father doesn't come home within the next hour, then Vladimir will be better off leaving immediately. Vlad doesn't want to leave because he's smitten by Sedenka, the daughter. The father went away 5 days ago and explained that if he didn't come home within 5 days, that they shouldn't let him in, as he would have become a wordalak as well. The deadline passes. That's mighty specific.
It is.
5 days.
5 days. That's how long it takes, I guess.
Yeah, but we see some people bitten later that don't take 5 days.
Oh.
Well, they see the old man approaching through the mists as the dog howls. He explains that he's hungry. The old man, Gorka, asks how long Vladimir will be staying. He gets tired of hearing the dog howling, as were we all, and orders Pietro to go outside and kill the dog. Gorka pulls the head of Arabek the bandit out of his sack. He orders it to be hung on the door of the house for all to see. And I wish we had some heads in our front yard.
No, you don't.
Gorka.
Well, this is the time of year, though. How just
nobody
call them
noticed
Halloween
now,
decorations.
yeah. Gorka sneaks into Vlad's bedroom that night, but when Vladimir wakes up, she sees the old man outside the window. The old man sneaks around the house that night while everyone is asleep. He grabs the little boy and carries him outside, but Vladimir spots this through the window again and tells everyone. Gorka and the boy ride up the mountain with Ivan in pursuit. Vlad stays behind to comfort Sedenka, who wants her to run away with him. Ivan brings the boy back, dead. Ivan wants to cut the boy's head off for safety, but the boy's mother refuses to allow it. Yep, got your little dead kid there. You want to cut his head off?
No!
Yeah, you should have. Even later that night, Vlad and Sedenka sneak out to the horses. Ivan and Marie wake up and see the little boy outside calling for his mother. Well, that certainly wasn't even 5 hours, much less 5 days.
Well, maybe when they're younger it goes quicker.
Ivan tells her not to go outside, but she's crazy and stabs him to death. Gorka comes in and kills her immediately. Vlad and Sedenka stop the rest of the night in an old castle. Gorka follows them there and calls Sedenka to him with hypnosis. The others are there too. The whole family are wordalaks now. Very little time.
Yep.
Vladimir wakes up and goes looking for Sedenka. She's gone, so he rides back to the house looking for her. She clutches her throat and warns him to ride on without her, but he refuses to leave her. Before long, it's all one big undead happy family.
Living happily ever after.
The end. And Karloff doesn't say anything afterwards. Well, it had a low budget, and it really shows. The acting is minimal at best, and some parts of each story felt dragged out, some for far, far too long. The cast was too small in some cases, and the sets were too limited in other cases. The whole phone, the one with the telephone, took place in one little room.
Yeah, yeah.
The one
Which
with
I guess they were going for a claustrophobic kind of effect.
Yeah. And the one in the beginning just had her and the maid talking. Nobody else had any dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, there just wasn't much going on in any of the stories either.
No.
It wasn't very well balanced, as the vampire segment was about twice as long as the other two stories. This was an Italian film financed with American money, so there's very little unnecessary dialogue, since they knew it was all going to have to be dubbed anyway. There's very little music, and absolutely no humor. It's all just kind of boring.
None.
Karloff had a pretty big role in the third segment, and he was the only one who even attempted any real acting. Supposedly he had a lot more to talk about as he introduced the segments, but most of that is said to have hit the cutting room floor.
Did you like it?
No. I thought it was very boring.
I thought it felt like I was being punished for something I didn't do. Having to watch it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd give it a solid 2. I mean, it was.
Whoa!
I don't think even Karloff could save that one. I've seen him do some things that I really enjoyed. I did not enjoy this one.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, just it wasn't good.
Which takes us to The Ritual from 2017.
Quite the opposite feeling about this one.
Oh, you like this one?
Oh, I liked it. I liked it even better the second time through.
Yeah,
this was my second viewing of it.
We have both seen this one before, and yeah, it is very good.
Yeah.
Directed by David Bruckner, written by Joe Barton and Adam Neville, stars Rafe Spall, Arsha Ali, and Robert James Collier. Hour and 34 minutes.
And there's going to be some spoilers here, just warning you, and you might want to check it out before.
There's always spoilers, but we always
spoilers.
give you a little heads up when it really matters.
Especially this one, I think, mattered a little more. A little more. Anyway, you are warned. Yeah.
Can we just say it's Midsummer with an actual monster?
And with a little Blair Witch thrown in there?
Oh, a little bit, yeah, yeah. All right, well, a group of 5 friends argue about doing something fun on their vacation, and they settle on going hiking in, was it Norway or Sweden?
Norway.
Somewhere cold. Luke and Robert go into a liquor store, which is in the process of being robbed. The robbers kill Robert, while Luke hides in the corner. Since it had been Robert's idea to go hiking, the surviving 4 end up going on the trip to northern Sweden as a sort of memorial to him 6 months later. Credits roll.
It was Sweden.
It was
I had
Sweden,
that wrong.
yes.
My bad.
Yeah. Well, every time someone brings up the murder, Luke looks guilty, as if he should have tried something, or done something. But he didn't, which was completely reasonable at the time. Mm-hmm. It's not like he was shivering and hiding in the corner or anything.
And he wasn't armed other than holding a bottle, and
he's guilty over something he had no control over.
The robbers had weapons, and
yeah,
and he was outnumbered, and but still he feels guilty.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, cue the urbanites trying to walk up a mountainside montage. At least until Dom twists his ankle, which is going to be a problem since they're really far out. Hutch suggests cutting through the forest, which will cut their journey to the lodge in half. Bad choice.
What could go wrong?
Well, we're about to see. Almost immediately, Hutch's compass stops working. The woods get deeper and thicker. Suddenly, they find a ripped open, still bleeding stag hanging way up in a tree. Could a bear have done that? It's like 20 feet up.
Well, and it's still bleeding.
Yeah, so
Still
it's fresh.
Yeah.
Well, whatever it is, it's still around. It starts to rain, so they decide to pitch their tents, but as they prepare, they spot a strange rune carved into a tree. Not far away is a building. They break in for shelter from the rain, and they hear something wandering around outside. They find some kind of witchcraft effigy thing up in the attic, which creeps them all out. That night, Luke dreams about the liquor store again, but he wakes up standing out in the woods with holes clawed in his chest. Hutch and Dom have also had a rough night, but they find Phil naked on his knees in front of that thing upstairs.
Yeah, it was a rough night for all of them.
Yeah. They find a path and set off through the woods again. They pass another creepy building, but decided we're not going to do that this time. Dom can't go on with his injury, so Luke goes on ahead to the high ridge, where he sees something big moving in the trees ahead. They all start arguing, and it turns out Dom does blame Luke for Robert's death. They find the ruins of a tent, including family photos, credit cards, and shoes.
And where did these people go?
It gets dark again, and they have to stop for the night once more. Something outside Luke's tent roars and makes a lot of noise. He has another flashback and wakes up to hear Phil screaming. They hear Hutch screaming in the woods and the creature roaring. It definitely took him.
And that was very Blair Witch. You know,
Yeah,
like
they're
when
all
they took Josh. Yeah.
When the sun rises, they find Hutch stuck up in a tree, just like the stag had been earlier. They bury Hutch and move on. They decide that the creature followed them after that first night in the weird house. They find some strange round footprints in the mud, but easily decide not to follow them.
Good idea.
I ain't going there.
Yeah.
They don't see that the creature is following them far more closely than they imagine. At this point, whenever they show the woods, you can kind of see it roaming around in the background.
Mm-hmm. You see its eyes a couple times.
Yeah. Luke goes ahead and sees the edge of the forest, and the thing gets Phil right in front of Luke. He finds Dom hiding and tells him they're going to have to run for it. 1, 2, 3, and they run for it. The thing comes out of the trees right behind them, but stops when they find torches lighting a path. They follow the lit-up path to another creepy house, and they hear chanting, and someone knocks them both out.
Cultists.
Well, that escalated quickly.
Yep, it did.
They wake up with their hands tied behind their backs. People are outside building something, and the people come in and drag Dom outside, roughing him up in preparation for a sacrifice. Luke is stuck inside listening to Dom's screams and the roars of the monster. Later they bring Dom back in, still alive, but in pretty bad shock. Dom tells Luke to burn the place to the ground and escape, since he knows he's not getting out of this alive. That evening, they come and take Dom outside and tie him to a pole. Meanwhile, Luke works on getting out of his ropes. He has to break his own thumb to do it.
And that's a cringeworthy little scene. It is. Yeah.
As the moon comes up, the creature comes for Dom. But to his shock and delight, it's his wife who tenderly puts her hands on his face. Until it shows its true form and hangs Dom in a tree like the others.
Yeah.
I guess it's kind of an illusion thing. It shows you who you want to see.
And I don't know if you mentioned in your notes that one of the cultists talks about it being the bastard son of Loki.
That's coming up.
And that's, the trickery and the mind games and the bad dreams and stuff that would all play in with that. It's got mind powers.
Yeah, a woman comes in and explains to Luke that it's the bastard son of Loki.
Go. Okay.
And they worship it. She tells Luke that he will kneel before their god or he will hang in a tree like the others. So she's kind of giving him a choice.
Yeah. He gets a choice for some reason.
Secretly out of his bonds,
he can join them.
Luke sets the place on fire, grabs a shotgun, and starts shooting cultists. Meanwhile, the creature is killing them too, and Luke finally gets a good look at the thing. He takes a shot at it, and it charges at him into the woods. There's a chase, but Luke finally gets out of the woods as the sun begins to come up. There's no indication that the sun was going to stop that thing.
Well, it couldn't leave the woods, fortunately. I think that's what it was. It wasn't the sun.
How did he know that?
He didn't know that, but, good thing.
And he gets like 10 feet out of the woods, turns around, and starts laughing at it.
Yeah, good thing.
I was expecting like that creep show oil slick thing to just jump out and get him.
Jumps out and gets him anyway, but it apparently couldn't leave the woods.
Yeah, well, then he walks to civilization, a survivor of whatever it was. The end.
Yeah.
Till the next one.
Yeah.
Well, there's good characters here, and we get to know each of the 4 guys quite a bit. The scenery is beautiful, and the situation is also very believable. Even the parts of the film before the monster shows up are entertaining. Being lost in the Swedish forest has got to be terrifying all by itself.
Uh-huh.
Like you said, Blair Witch-ish.
Yeah.
It's got a little bit of Blair Witch, a little bit of Deliverance, and even a hint of Midsummer. It's tense, it's suspenseful, and it's very well made.
Yeah, it's really
and it's
excellent.
Really good.
Yeah.
I don't get the feeling it was a big budget film. Cool. It's mostly just a bunch of guys walking through the woods.
A lot of it was, yeah.
The creature at the end, though, was really cool.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to describe that one.
Mm-hmm.
It's a unique animal.
Yeah.
So I think
worth seeing.
I think this is easily the best film we saw this week.
I think so. Yeah.
All right. Well, you'll notice we don't have commercials or ads on this show, and we stopped mentioning Patreon over a year ago. The show is completely free in every way for you. That said, if you want to support us, then pick up one of our books.
Pick up all the books.
Oh, even better.
Yeah.
We've got the Horror Guy's Guide to Shock Theater. The other one in the same series, the Horror Guy's Guide to the Son of Shock.
And we got some short stories, too.
We do. We've got the Tales to Make You Shiver, Volume 1 and Volume 2. There's a whole book, the Horror Guy's Guide to Hammer Horror. And we would tell you about the Horror Guy's Guide to the Silent Age of films, but we can't say.
Talk about that, because it's silent.
Well, if you enjoy the show, or better yet, you know someone else who might find it interesting, then somewhere on your podcast app is a button to share the episode. Share it with someone who's interested in horror films, and get them on board too. We'd appreciate it. Speaking of appreciating things, did we see any good shorts this week?
We saw Animals.
Animals
And that
from
was
2021.
pretty darn good. Pretty weird.
That was real weird.
Yeah.
Written and directed by Tuli Sangard, which sounds very Norwegian. Stars animated. Runtime 6 minutes, 19 seconds. Got a link in the show notes to take you right to YouTube where you can watch it.
And it's a strange kind of animation. It's not a strictly cartoon. It's, yeah.
I think it's just computerized. It just looks, It looks sort of claymation-y.
Yeah.
But I think it's really
But
just
not
computer.
really models.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
We begin with
Really
people
good.
doing normal things on a train. A man comes out of the restroom blowing a horn, which annoys everyone. The train stuck. There's nothing when you're stuck on a train or a bus and somebody's playing music. Is it ever anything you want to hear?
Not so far.
Is it ever not incredibly annoying? Does it ever not want to make you punch them right in the teeth?
No, pretty much.
Keep your music in your own ears. Mm-hmm. Well, the train stops at the next station, but the doors won't open. The man with the horn continues to annoy more people, and now they're all just eager to get off that train, but the doors won't open at the next stop either. Panic ensues rather excessively.
Oh, yeah. Very excessively.
Well, you can certainly tell that this one's European. That's about the best I can say. Yeah. Well, there's nudity, which is kind of weird.
Yeah.
Animated nudity, which is even weirder.
Naked cartoon characters, yeah.
It's probably safe to say that the guy who created this had more than one bad experience on the train wherever he lives.
And this is expressing it.
Yeah, you should go watch that one. And next up, we have an indie film.
HorrorTales.666. Part 2.
Let's make it more complicated. Horror Tales, all one word, period, 666. HorrorTales.666, Part 2.
And Part 1 was done quite some time ago, wasn't
2003.
it? Yeah, okay. 1973? What?
2000, not quite that
2003,
long.
yeah.
It's been a while. We didn't see the first part.
And it's not practical available. I mean, you can't.
I mean, you might be able to find a used DVD somewhere.
Yeah, but part 1 isn't really out there.
Tis gone.
It is out there, but not. Yeah. So anyway, Brian made me write up the review for this one because he wasn't sure he'd be able to say anything nice about it ahead of time, but he ended up enjoying it. I think I certainly did.
I'll reserve that for the end.
Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway, we got directed by Derek Brosh, Matt Cannon, Marcello Favani, Phil Herman, Joe Sherlock.
A lot of people. Because it's an anthology.
And written by the same people.
Yeah, them too.
Stars Joel D. Wincoop, Phil Herman, Dustin Hubbard. Runtime 1 hour 56 minutes, and there is a link to the IMDb entry, at least, in the show notes. Now, can people watch it out online?
I don't think it has been released yet. I could be wrong.
All right.
It's not a touchscreen.
I'm trying to touch screen. I'm using Brian's computer. It's touching the screen. Okay, so synopsis. Note that this is a long-delayed follow-up to the first movie that came out in 2003. I don't know if anyone ever watched that film, but it's currently a bit hard to find. And from what I could see of the reviews and still photos, that's probably fine. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, both films are anthologies, and so you don't need to have seen the original. So we start out with some opening credits music that is hard and fast enough to clear out your sinuses, and the movie never lets up that pace, pretty much. It's one thing after another, and that's a good thing. Well, The Voice reads an opening narrative about the burglar, who once again is breaking into homes and regretting it, in for a rude awakening from the very bowels of hell.
Yeah, and this apparently was a continuation from the first film. The same actor broke into houses, and this voice made him read the stories.
You must read.
So he's like the host, or the wraparound story in both films.
Mm-hmm. Well, casing the neighborhood in broad daylight, an interesting choice, because he's not subtle about it.
No,
anybody looking.
I'm surprised he wasn't wearing a black diamond mask or something.
Yeah. Well, he watches as a resident across the street leaves. He quickly breaks in through their front door, After an intense and angry soliloquy, he looks for something worth taking. He encounters witchery in the kitchen, and the stories begin to unfold. First up is Open House. Years after her parents were murdered by a masked killer, Sue is trying to succeed as a realtor. Despite a comically egotistical boss and conniving coworkers, can she overcome her demon from the past without it crossing over into the present?
We'll see.
Yeah. And next up is The Last Farewell of Mr. Perez. A voice narrating from the afterlife details Mr. Perez's last day on Earth, and it quickly morphs into a science fiction tale of an alien who was one of the chaperones of humanity, acting as his long-dead mother. And it's strange and unexpected and surprisingly poignant. And then we have Sleigh Ride, a Christmas story of peace and happiness.
Okay,
Yay!
I like this one. I like this one.
You like this one the best? Yeah. Not quite, as Santa Jr. is taking over the job this year for the big guy. And he's jolly until he finds out what Mrs. Claus Jr. is up to with one of the elves. And things get dark from there. The most darkly funny of the tales.
Definitely.
Oh, so horribly funny. Yeah. Well, yeah. And then we got The Present. The wraparound asks, who knows what goes on in this hotbed of suburban lust and depravity? Well, this story shows us in detail. And it's just an ordinary evening in an ordinary home until it's not. Oh boy, it's not. Husband comes home after work to a wife making dinner, and they have a little wine and some spaghetti and, a nice dinner, and she surprises him with a little gift.
She made a new friend.
Yeah, and holy crap, that did not go where I was expecting it to go, even when you know where it's gonna go. And yeah, that was something.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the last one is My Life, where the movie swallows its own tail as Phil Herman, one of the writers, and producer Dustin Hubbard play themselves, struggling with the quirky personalities and egos of show business as they try to put together the movie HorrorTales.666 Part 2. They need a narrator.
They don't need a narrator.
Would you like to be the narrator? Yeah, that's the running joke. They don't need a narrator, but all these people want to narrate it.
And it's basically just one phone call after another of people
video calls
volunteering to narrate the show.
Yeah, it derails from the horror, but it's still pretty funny. And though it goes on a bit too long, I thought that segment. Yeah. Well, okay. Shall I read my commentary? And I should read your commentary.
No, I'll read
too.
mine. You
okay.
just read yours.
Well, my comments. Joel D. Wincoop owns the wraparound story as the burglar, angry, trapped, unable to escape the destiny that's been forced upon him. Which I guess was like what happened in the first one too.
Yeah.
From what I heard. Yeah. Overlook the indie vibe of the movie. Just relax and let yourself be entertained. The stories are well written and engaging. And the acting is decent. The pacing is good. Special effects get the job done. It's got gore and cringe and humor and the unexpected. And all in all, I give it a strong thumbs up.
Wow.
Brian said,
You're easy.
Brian said less nice things about it. But yeah.
I still didn't hate it.
He didn't hate it, and I liked it. And,
all right, well, I got 5 minutes into this thing and handed the laptop to Kevin, and I noped right out after the credit music made my eyes bleed. Once I was freed from writing a review, I decided to sit through the damn thing and throw popcorn at the screen. And before it was done, I said, "Oh, that wasn't so bad after all." That wasn't so bad after all. That's going to be a great quote. I did read some other reviews that were pretty harsh on the final segment, but I think I enjoyed that one the most. Maybe except for Sleigh Ride. But I do think it went on for 2 or 3 phone calls too long. I can honestly say this wasn't the worst film I've seen this month.
Okay.
Yeah, that final, all the reviews that I read really hated that final segment because it was not horror.
No, it
was
wasn't.
Comedy at best, and didn't really belong here. If anything, it could have been a good special feature on a DVD set or something.
Yeah, an extra feature, maybe.
But it's not horror. It didn't belong here. So, yeah, I can understand why people didn't like it. But it was kind of funny because I recognized a lot of the people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah.
All right. And the last one. The Strangers.
The Strangers.
2008. And I had never seen it before.
I had seen it before. I saw it when it came out.
Well, you knew it was going to happen then,
So,
didn't you?
I had spoilers ahead of time, yeah.
Written and directed by Brian Bertino. Stars Scott Speedman, Liv Tyler, and Gemma Ward. Hour and 26 minutes. Did you like it?
I did, yeah. It was pretty good.
I think it was very well made.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the kind of thing I'm into.
Pretty good.
I like the monsters. I like the witchcraft. I like the supernatural.
There's none of that.
Just a bunch of crazy people doing home invasions. I'll watch Law and Order.
It's crazy people. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's a 911 call. A couple of little Mormon boys come to an open door and find a murder scene. Credits roll. Kristen and James come home from a wedding to his house out in the country. She's crying, and it appears they've been arguing. We get a flashback to what happened earlier. He proposed to her, and she shot him down. Awkward.
Very awkward.
Now they're stuck in the country home together for at least tonight, and James calls his friend Mike to come and pick him up in the morning.
And he's got the place all decorated with rose petals and all
he went
kinds of
all out for
romantic
this.
stuff set out, and champagne, and
It would have been the perfect evening, except for one little glitch.
for one little detail. Yeah.
Now they're both very sad and depressed until someone knocks at the door at 4 a.m. A woman is at the door asking for Tamara, and James explains that there's no Tamara there. The woman leaves. James leaves to get cigarettes and leaves Kristen in the house alone. While he's gone, she tries on the wedding ring and wonders if she's made a mistake. There's another knock at the door. Someone asks, "Is Tamara home?"
She's persistent.
Well, the fire in the fireplace starts to smoke, so she disconnects the smoke detector. I thought that was going to come back and be important later.
Well, only in the smoke detector
gets
flips
moved.
over, gets moved, so she knows someone's in the house.
She calls James and tells him to hurry up, but then the phone goes dead, and we soon see that someone is already in the house.
Yep.
Kristen notices that the smoke detector isn't where she left it, and she knows she's not alone. Meanwhile, someone is still knocking at the door. She finally looks out the window and sees two people in masks.
Uh-oh.
That's when it stops being annoying and starts getting scary.
Yeah.
James comes in and he didn't see anything. He says there's nobody there and obviously doesn't believe her. They search the house, not noticing her cell phone is burning in the fireplace. They do see one girl standing at a distance from the house, just standing and staring. He goes outside and the car has been trashed and the tires have been slashed. They both go outside and try to drive off in the car, even with flat tires, but someone is parked behind them who then accelerates and rams their car. They run back into the house. James finds a shotgun and ammo, but he doesn't really know how to use it. It's clear that the bad guys have been in the bedroom already. The people outside use an axe to cut through the door, Shining style.
Here's Johnny.
Meanwhile...
They don't say that, though.
They should.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Mike, James's friend, arrives early to pick him up as planned, but James shoots him by mistake. They both freak out a bit over that, almost forgetting that there are bad people in the house. James tries to go out to the barn to use a radio to call for help, but he runs into trouble outside. Kristen runs outside, but hurts her foot and can't run anymore. She makes it to the barn, but doesn't see James there. The baddies smash the radio, so that's not going to help him anyway.
So you get the impression it's just one thing after another.
It is.
Yeah.
Kristen looks around, and now she sees 3 bad guys, and Mike's car is now on fire. There's a lot more cat and mouse action that follows. Finally, one of them knocks out Kristen and drags her away. The sun comes up, and the 3 strangers admire the 2 helpless people tied to chairs. The 3 takes their mask off at last, but we don't know who they are. They stab James a couple of times, and he dies. Then it's time for Kristen. We come back to the 2 little Mormon boys who stop by the house in the morning. They pass the trio in the pickup truck on the road, who stop and ask one of the boys for one of their pamphlets. It'll be easier next time, one of them remarks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That happened.
Was there a sequel?
No, not that I
don't
know.
remember one.
No.
Well, this is one of those it could really happen kind of horror movies, but fortunately it doesn't happen very often. At no point do we ever find out why the strangers are doing this. Just for sick fun, I guess. For a while, I suspected that the biggest intruder was going to turn out to be James, since he appeared on the scene just a little too conveniently a couple of times.
And they were similarly dressed, him and one of the guys. Yeah, it was kind of a red herring there.
And it was sort of one of those gaslighting things like, no, there's nothing wrong.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But that's not the way it went. The first time the girl came to the door, James said it was 4 a.m. The rest of this all had to have happened before the sun came up that same morning.
A lot seems to happen.
Yeah. Also, am I the only one who is bothered by the fact that the tub of ice cream on the kitchen table was open and melting during the whole ordeal? He gets back from this... Before he gets to the store even, he's starting to eat this ice cream out of a tub. Mm-hmm. Then he goes to the store for cigarettes.
And they leave
the ice cream out on the table. That people don't do that.
No, that's just wrong.
It was almost full tub, too, you could tell. Well, it was good. Probably one of the earliest home invasion kind of films, which eventually led to things like The Purge and, a dozen others. But yes, it was very good. Best film of the week from me was The Ritual.
Oh, me too.
Followed by The Strangers.
Yep.
Followed by Animals. And I'm just going to leave it to your imagination whether HorrorTales.666 Part 2 or Black Sabbath takes the lead.
Oh, I liked Horror Tales far better.
So did I. Yeah. Black Sabbath just blah.
Yeah, just...
They call it Blah Sabbath.
Yeah, Blah Sabbath. That's exactly... That's a good way to put it. What do we got next week?
We got more stuff next week. What do we got?
Well, we'll be watching a few classics. We'll be watching The Haunting from 1963.
That's a good movie. I heard they made a remake.
They did in 1999. We're going to watch that too. And talk
Both of them?
Both of them.
Multiple Hauntings.
Insidious from 2010.
Oh, yeah.
And another Dracula, a Count Dracula from 1977, which was a BBC production.
It was.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we're not going to review it because it was like 9 parts, but a while back we saw The Haunting of Hill House on Netflix.
Yeah.
And we both liked that one a lot.
Yep.
It's a little long at 9 parts.
But it ties in with The Haunting.
It's like a more modern remake of The Haunting from next week. We'll talk about that next time.
Yeah.
All right. I'm Brian.
And I'm Kevin.